So yeah, hi, I am Shama Godos and welcome to this episode of the Book Replay. So I spent all week reading like The Incredible Dreams of Garba Dacascos. I created a short review. I submitted it for the review contest. You can find it on my Instagram. You can find it as a short on this channel. I hope I win because I know I need this money, to be honest. Let me know, like, I know it's a lot for the game, but if I get this money now like this, I can buy more books. He said, I can buy more equipment. And yeah, if you remember, I was talking about like who helped me contribute for a mic, and Santa showed up, and I really want to thank Santa. I don't know if you allow me to call his name here, for helping me get this mic. It gives me a lot more confidence now to actually come here and just come and see things. When I said I was going to resume this channel, I said that the first book I was actually going to review was TJ Benson's The Madhouse. It was kind of like ideated, conceptualized, and written in front of me. And, it really helped me see the back end of the novel writing process. Like, even as I try to write books or as I try to teach people or guide people on how to write their own novels, I kind of still base a lot of what I say on what I saw TJ Benson do while he was ideating for this novel in the times that we were together. I felt like I had more inside information. I would be able to tell people why this was this, why this was that. That was my idea for the review. But when I encountered the finished work itself, one of the things I realized was that what I expected the work to look like was not what the work looked like. So while he was writing the book, I had an idea of what the shape of this book would be. But the finished work was completely different. There was no line in this book that went to waste at all. I can tell you that for free. When we talk about the literary elements inside here in this book, they are really, really, really strong. I've read the book quite a number of times, and it always stays fresh. That's one thing with the Madhouse. It fills me with the same sense of wonder as the first time that I actually read it from start to finish. And there's a lot to say about the Madhouse. Following a script when I'm going to be talking about a book is something that we are simply not going to do on this channel. 2 hours earlier, I could feel myself just actually crashing out while I was trying to follow the script. So I'm really just going to go off the books. I'm going to refer to my notes. I'll just have an outline and we are just going to go. I would like to start with the person who made this book possible. Let's start by talking about TJ Benson. TJ Benson is a Nigerian writer, visual artist, photographer, and jeweler. Yeah, he made this for me, and I have like 3 others that, he even made like some bands in my hair. I will put the name down in the description. He makes like really good stuff out of brass. It's very, very earthy, very, very African. I feel like an African king whenever I'm wearing his stuff, man, He's currently at the Iowa State University teaching creative writing. He has authored 3 books. That's a short story collection, We Won't Fade Into Darkness, and 2 novels, The Madhouse and People Live Here. And The Madhouse was our book of the month at the Wildcard Reading Club for October, and in November we had like a Twitter space with TJ Benson. When we talked, he said he was working on his 3rd novel and, a lot of other things. He's a genius, so, there's just like a lot of things that he goes on. You can follow him on Twitter, you can follow him on Instagram, and you can see what he does. He was the person who gave me The English Patience, the book that I said in the last episode ruined my life. I really, really hold him personally in high regard as a person, and then as an artist, it has been wonderful really watching his artistry grow from, where I met him and what it is now. And there's just so much potential, basically. So that is what I can say about the author from my point. So yeah, it definitely fits that The Madhouse is the first official review of the Book Replay, because I think it is the piece of literature that I've been in the closest proximity to in my life. So now let's talk about Madhouse, the book. The first thing that makes the Madhouse really, really fun for me was the cover. Now, there are 2 covers because this is the Nigerian print, the one that was printed by Masobe. Let's do just simple design hierarchy, simple graphic design lesson. So what catches your attention here? The Madhouse in yellow. It has this contrast against this yellow. It jumps out at you. So the Madhouse. Next, TJ Benson, and then a novel. So information hierarchy is actually solid. And of course, when you go to the back, all of this is really good, centralized and all of that. What I really like about this cover is first, you see red, and then you see the blue, and then there's where they meet, there is the ombre. So I have a theory about this because red is kind of like the color of madness. I would say when you are mad, you sort of see red. If you're angry, you see red. So as far as it comes to the concept of madness, red is that motile, unstable, moving madness. Meanwhile, there are madnesses that are just like silent crash out. So something like depression, I think that's a madness on its own. So, and that's blue. 2 of them now come and converge in the middle. That's purple on this house. So red and blue, the 2 forms of madness, meet in this house, the Madhouse. So in this Madhouse, there are several forms of madnesses. That's what the cover says. See, the moment I actually thought about this and I figured this out as a theory that I am going to die with, I felt really close to the book. Book cover 5/5, no notes. As for the penguin cover, the second cover, I really do not know. I've never seen it in real life. I've only seen it in digital art, and I wouldn't like to say anything about that. So yeah, now when we talk about the content of this book, I'm going to proceed as if, I am teaching fiction. Writers, you guys are about to get some free game. So I'll be consulting my notes. I'll probably be downright reading from them. To start talking about this content, I'd like to talk about the base of every, fictional work, and that is premise. I define premise as the central idea that propels the story forward, and I will surmise the premise of the Madhouse as this: the receipt of love cures madness. Now, there are several other premises that you can draw from the stories inside it, and it's one thing I saw while I was reading the Madhouse is that through the Madhouse, we'll see that madness itself is in fact caused by love, not returned to the lover. Is it Sharif's love story, which starts with him living in a country and he loves that country, but the country doesn't love him back. His wife, who ran away from her father's house because she didn't get enough love in that house, or Max, their first son, who loved his brother more than himself, and that really led to all sorts of problems, or his brother Andre, who could not just find it within himself to love himself, their sister Ladidi, who suffered from unrequited love. So there's always love and madness in everybody's story. That's one thing that is constant in the Madhouse. That's why I'm going with the premise: the receipt of love cures madness. I think Tafa's story proves this premise without fault. Now let's move into narrative structure, because I like to get into the technical down of this book. So from where I'm standing, I would say narrative define how a story unfolds: the why the story is told, the what is being told, the how it is being told, and the who is being told. Framing, pacing, all of those elements that deal with the construction of a story and its delivery. TJ Benson's construction of the Madhouse is nothing short of brilliant. See, I expected nothing less from him, but it still blew my mind. When we talk about narrative, we talk about structure, which is how the story is told. So I see the structure of the Madhouse as a 5-petaled flower. The story is structured in 5 parts, around 5 characters, who are the 5 members of the Madhouse. We start from the first petal, which is Max. We loop around his story, and then we go to Andre, we loop around his story. We go to Ladidi, we loop around her story. We go to Sweet Pea, we loop around her story. We go to the father, Sharif, I will loop around his story, and then we come back to the beginning. The Madhouse starts in the kitchen and ends in the kitchen. And how the conflict is introduced in a very simple line. It opens with 3 men in a kitchen trying to bake a cake according to the recipe that a woman, their mother, left. There's this sort of discordance in how they are trying to follow this recipe. You could see when the way they talk to each other that these people are not really happy with each other. The line that introduces this conflict is when Sharif asks Max that, "You will tell me why you stopped calling your mother." Going back and reading it for the 3rd time, and after reaching the end and going back to read it for the 3rd time, really blew my mind that was where the conflict started. Between these 2 scenes, whereas that's this opening scene in the kitchen, the scene in the ending, we go through the lifetimes, trials, and tribulations of these 5 people. We see what happened, how they were born, and how they went from where they started to where they ended, and all of the experiences. At the end of the day, what I saw in this book was that I saw a family that they just loved each other so much that no matter how far they strayed, they were able to come back. The cost of love and all of that. But we'll get into that when we start talking about the characters. So yeah, that is the structure of the book. I'm trying not to spoil it because, see, if you are very well versed in literary fiction, you know that spoilers do not really reduce the experience of the novel. I mean, it does so for genre fiction, but for literary fiction, a lot of times it's about the experience that we get in these books. We read our books up to 10 times over our lifetime because of the things that we experience inside. We know how the story ends, but it's not just about the story for literary fiction, it's about the other elements. You have the writing, the language, the style, you have the experimental devices. Reading literary fiction actually even helps you become better as a writer because they sort of hone your craft just by you experiencing them. So, if you want to be a writer, even if you're going to be writing movies or you're going to be writing comics, I urge you to read literary fiction because it is very, very, very academic and artistic in the way it approaches literature and stories. So let's talk about the plot. Chronologically, our story starts when Father Jerome finds Sharif abandoned as a baby, and he takes him in, and Sharif actually grows up, then he joins the army traumatizes him, and then he stays in the house to deal with his trauma. So he lives in the house alone. Sweet Pea runs away from her father's house because, she's not getting a lot of love yet, and she goes to start a new life in Kaduna, buys a house, but she enters the house and realizes that the house is occupied, but by then the agent that sold her the house has gone. The agent cheated her. She has nowhere to go, and she starts to live inside the house, and that is where she meets Sharif. And they fall in love, and then she gets pregnant, and she gives birth to a baby. And that's how Max comes into the Madhouse. Professor who gave the house to shoot, told Sharif to stay inside the house, now returns to the country with his wife, Sarai, and, they start to hang out, they start to spend time. And then when the assassination of Dele Giwa happens, it's a time of turmoil, and the professor has to escape before he is targeted because, they are targeting a cabal of people. We discover that Sarai is pregnant. Sarai is one of Sweet Pea's very closest friend, and Sarai's brother and Sweet Pea that sort of see Sarai through this pregnancy. However, the baby is taken by the brother and returns to the Madhouse years later after the birth of Andre. Everybody comes to the Madhouse somewhat. Andre is also giving birth to in the Madhouse after a time of, a small time of separation between Sharif and Sweet Pea. Chronologically, that's how the Madhouse comes to be. This is the backstory you need to know about how everybody came to be. And then, of course, the story is not about what happened in the Madhouse and how they lived. Now we've treated plots, so let's move into place and setting. So the Madhouse is set in the 90s where we had so many assassinations. Like, the famous incident of Dele Giwa, that assassination, a letter bomb that has gagged the Nigerian press since then, and, it killed our literary industry even. Jesus. There are so many tragedies and massacres that we don't really talk about, and I find that exploring the 90s is something that I don't really get enough of, and this is a very, very wonderful and fantastic rendition of the 90s. At the beginning of the book, after, they have that whole spat in the kitchen, and they realize that there's no baking pan for them to even bake a cake. So Max, after seeing that his father wants to goad him into sort of a fight, now decides, because he's very avoidant and stuff, I don't know, now steps out of the house to go and buy a baking pan. Then we launch into talking about Freetown Streets. I think this is the part that loses most readers, because you expect that Max goes to buy the baking pan and comes back to the kitchen, and then the story continues from there. But no, from Freetown Streets, we now go into the other aspects of Max's life. It's a very, very beautiful flow. Freetown Streets is a microcosm of what Nigeria was like. I mean, in Freetown Streets, where they lived, because their house was at the end of Freetown Street. And in the 90s, when they were younger, they were the last house on the right on Freetown Street. And in there was hardly light. Superstitions ruled the place as the inhabitants were effectively locked out of information. People died, people suffered mental breakdowns, yet children still grew. Kind of like Nigeria in the 90s. By just talking about Freetown Street in that way, we just get the essential bits on what Nigeria was like. It's a technique that I really, really like and I adore. But this is all classroom stuff, so please, you guys, I thoroughly enjoyed reading about Freetown Streets. First time I actually read the book, that was actually the part I hated the most. I guess that I just wasn't really ready to receive that then. So I'll finish the session by saying that doing that is such a good way to ground place and setting when you are writing a story. The voice, the language, and the dialogue, they all harmonize with the place and setting. Like in this book, our characters, when they speak, they dig into broken English, pidgin, and other conversational quirks they use in the 90s. Now, a lot of people fear that literary fiction can be eccentric and, it's sometimes dreary. But I can tell you that you'll not have a problem reading this book because the language is as contemporary as it is. In fact, if you are a 90s child, if you're a millennial, this is kind of your story. One of the things I like about this book is that TJ Benson is more worried about telling the story of the characters rather than just, finishing the novel. I can geek about the amount of literature in this book and we will never stop. It is not just this that the story is good, it's also the fact that the writing is also fantastic. The characters in the Madhouse are amazing. They are very, very three-dimensional, and they are strong in the way that they take control of their stories. They just pop into my head as people. I know that Max has a bald head. I think Andre looks elfin in some way. I know Sharif has tight muscles and his eyes are black with Tozali. But what is important is in the way the characters express themselves, the way they talk about each other, or the way they are talked about. Each interaction sort of adds a new layer to the character that you do not know, and you don't forget them at all. Now, in a story like The Madhouse, where the name infers that we are stepping into something that is, mental, mad, something enclosed. A madhouse is something that is enclosed with a lot of emotional reactions. In this story, the characters are what is most important, and that is why, he makes the decision to progress from character to character to character. I think TJ Benson identified that at the start of this novel. I remember when he was talking about this book, he was like, one of the first scenes was of a woman leaving her house to go and find her missing son. The way it was when he told me was completely different from how I experienced it now. And, it's what I'll round up this by saying is that characters make everything work, dear writer. So let's talk about Max. I think that's the first person in the story. The Madhouse starts with a section, blue. And this is the story of Macmillan Sharif. Max is 33 years old and he's seeking to mend things with his family as he returned home. So we opened with him with his kitchen, with his father and brother, and the whole cake baking kini. When he steps into Freetown Street, the story sort of unrolls and we just hear about Max. So here is the essential of Max's story. Max's story is kind of a story of how, too much self-sacrifice, too much altruism can lead to madness. And in his case, I would say it is depression. Because it is not necessarily the premise of his personal story. I won't say that's his personal premise. I'm ready to dig into that. But it is really one of the sub-premises of this book. How I think about it is that if love leads to madness, then specific applications of affection will lead to specific kinds of madness. And in Max's case, what he did was that he emptied himself out while trying to protect his younger brother, and he ends up not really living life on his own terms and, just being depressed, just not being himself. Because there was a time that he had to run away from school just to make it the time to stop his brother from doing something awful, and even leaving work to travel to a different country to go and find his brother, which he found, by the way. Max kept giving pieces of himself out, even the pieces he was supposed to keep for himself. And he did this without taking time to heal, without taking time to grow or receive love. He actually gives up a lot of things in his life. And when it was time for him to show up for himself, there just wasn't enough of Max to show up for Max. So it really is a tragic story of a man that spent his life functioning instead of living, but it's something that we can all learn from. So please, if you are over self-sacrificing, I'll encourage you to read Max's story and just get a first-hand experience. A reader's experience of what that could be. Now we move on to Andre. Now Andre is not popular with the girlies. I think in our book review in the Wildcard, everybody was like, Andre is just a bum-ass nigga. And I understand, but I still find him to still be some sort of victim of, the amount of gifts that he has been blessed with. Max is blue, but Andre is red. Remember the book cover. Max, Andre. Sorry, I'm fanboying over this book too much. Andre is an incredibly talented person. He has an amazing ear for music, musical composition. He can sing, and he's this genial spirit that people want to love and hold. He is that kind of person that when he steps into a community, he becomes the center of that community. Now, I would say his central problem was that he doesn't really love himself. He hates himself. And that could stem from the fact that he kept having dreams where his twin brother appears and said that Andre is the one that killed him. So that could be where this inability to self-love comes from. I think he suffered from some sort of identity disorder, if you ask me. And throughout Andre's, living, life seemed to charge at him with murderous rage because it was just calamity after calamity after calamity. But he always kind of found his way back home. So the question is, what did not happen to Andre? He went missing. He was kidnapped. His father saw him and could not get to him and had to kidnap him to come back home. He left the house one time and started his own community. He was headhunted by international artists. He experienced the underground sex scene in Amsterdam, joins an international suicide pact for the sake of art, and he almost dies. The only reason why Andre is still alive is because of the altruism of Max. It is until Andre gets a child that he fixes up his act. Throughout the book, a lot of people say that it felt like Andre did not grow up. I can see how they'll say that, but you know what? That's something we can talk about in the post-narrative space. One of the things that also disturbed our readership when we read it was that everyone was like, Andre gets a nice ending because he gets a child while, something else happens to other people. But, life is like that. It is very easy for you to love people and not love yourself. A lack of self-love can also lead to madness, I get. Now, it might be cute and all, and it might be very functional in society, but it is a form of madness that can lead to maybe some sort of mental disorders and stuff. Now, Ladidi is perhaps my favorite character in this entire story. She comes into the Madhouse, exists for a relatively short while, like a flash in a pan. And here's some background into where she came from. I think I told you that she is a child of Sarai. Her paternity is contested. Okay, let's talk about all of these things. Ladidi is the daughter of Sarai, sweet peace friend. And I think she was a spy of the British government. I do not remember that. She had to go into hiding when they started hunting all of those spies. She dies during childbirth, and the daughter was taken by her brother. And later on, Ladidi returns to the Madhouse because next of kin for Sarai was Sweet Pea. There's a small divide on Ladidi's parentage. Who is her father? TJ Benson says it's one of those open-ended things that he doesn't know what happens. But I beg to differ. I believe that we can all tell who Ladidi's father is. And I would like everybody to read the book and come back and tell me who Ladidi's father is, because I have a theory that I'm working with. I don't think it is open-ended. Me and my book club, we have talked about this at length, and I have even gone, I even took this to the Twitter space. So I think that, it's a very, very interesting conversation we could have. And, just by perusing the text and all of that, I think it's pretty clear in the text. And I think that just not knowing who Ladidi's father is certainly adds like mystique to Ladidi's origins. Ladidi is a very, very mysterious girl. So Sweet Pea brings her to the house. She develops a huge crush on Max, but is unrequited. And to fill that hole in her life, she develops this very interesting, godlike persona in school. Like, she becomes like the goddess of the school at one point. There's even a boy that escapes, follows trucks to go and bring a strawberry for her. People in school line up to get their ears pierced by her. Like, students actually ordered their lives according to her menstrual cycle. Like, that even turns that heartbreak from Max into incredible power, turning whatever love that was unrequited back into herself, and it just becomes like this very, very amazing girl. That really just shows me the real power of self-love. And it's this kind of self-love that I think that motivational books cannot teach you. You have to really find it in yourself and stuff. Since all of the stories in Madhouse, that each section is sort of like self-contained, I think one of the first parts that you can read, because I go back and I read Ladidi's parts just for fun, because I really like what that does to me. And it's one of the happiest places in the books if you can just, ignore one or two things. Seriously, was really cooking something with Ladidi, honestly. So if Ladidi is a goddess, Sweet Pea is kind of like the natural force that moves through the Madhouse and, centers it. Like, everything there revolves around her. She's the person who gets handed the documents to the Madhouse and the documents to Sleep Sweet Hotel. She takes ownership. She is not necessarily the friend of the professor, but he sees her as very, very capable. It is her paintings that feed them in the house when Sharif was walking through his PTSD and drinking and failing the household. It is her strength that stays the house as they sail through the tumultuous seas of the 90s. Where, Nigerians were getting poorer. You see, Sweet Pea has an inner strength that I like. She's the one who exits her father's house on her own and heads into Kaduna and starts her life. She survives in spite of everything and builds and holds a very, very good family. As Sharif says, she's a fire. Sweet Pea is a self-starting fire. Why Sharif goes away, because for some reason he's like Andre and also attracts trouble. Jesus Christ. It is Sweet Pea that takes care of the home. When we come to Sweet Pea's story, the Madhouse becomes the study of a home, which is, of course, the microcosm of a society. Now, for most stories, there's some family trauma to deal with, some family secrets to uncover. But the Madhouse, sort of like, these conflicts come from the characters themselves. It doesn't come from, some sort of event that everybody reacts to. And it just really feels natural and intrinsic. And that's why a lot of readers say that the story is going nowhere, because, there's no really one issue to latch onto. But like I said, focus on the characters and you understand the story better. Sweet Pea is extremely creative, and it's something that she gives to Andre, all of that talent. She teaches her children to express themselves. There's a part on their house where they go and paint walls. Even when she's teaching at school, she actually does these exercises that help her students just, expand their mind. So, of course, Sweet Pea makes some mistakes, because what desperate mother in this life hasn't overwritten the will of her children to save their lives? What mother hasn't done that? But I'll let you see that for yourself when you read this story. So if you really want to understand that, read Sweet Pea's story and it will get. Now, let's talk about Sharif. Now, Sharif is truly a troubled man. He was abandoned as a child, and that rejection sort of like mars the trajectory of his life. He's well educated, as a seminarian, and also, in the ways of Islam. He has served in the army, and he's capable enough to even write a book on his own, a book that, even gets him in trouble. He's an intelligent, brooding blue man. In another life, he would have been a scholar. Yeah, because he has the capacity to do that. The guy has ideas, and he was able to live by himself and not lose his mind completely and still be himself, just this really confident guy. He's clearly idealistic in his approach to things, I'll give you that. When things happen to him, he feels them deeply. He is sensitive. Comes in clutch for the house in many times. There's a story with the antelope that I would like you to discover for yourself, because, it was incredibly sexy to read that, to be really honest. That brooding nature is what he gives to Max, and that's why I think Max is that way. The central conflict at the start of is that Sharif is not getting on with his sons, and it is his past that ends his story. What happens? Does he finally get along with his sons? That particular last conflict is resolved at the end. It's just really beautiful how his side, his section of the Madhouse comes in and make everything strong and just, wonderful. So the characters in the Madhouse are even more layered than how I have. Like, we could take on each of these characters and we could discuss them as topics, as ideas that they represent. But, that would require, that we have a proper Madhouse meeting. I don't know if we would have time to do that. Let us move on to, the themes and ideas that really, really touched me in this story. I can't treat everything in my head because a story like this is gardened. TJ Benson said that he wrote this story over 9 years, and stories that are written for such a long time, with the technique that he used is gardening. So it's kind of like you have a seed of a story and you plant it inside the page, and then you see how this story develops. So the Madhouse basically runs on love. I think love is the central theme in this place. And it explores several kinds of love and love relationships in its story. We see the ups and downs of marital love, the sogginesses, the battles that Sweet Pea and Sharif engage in with the world and each other as they struggle to stay together no matter what. Even when she becomes conscious of her fate, when she sees her future with this man, she still stays with Sharif. She sticks with him. We see pure fraternal love that Max has for Andre. We see paternal love from Sharif's two fathers, Father Jerome and, the Imam. We see the motherly love that flows from Sweet Pea, all of this relationship. We also see the youthful love that bursts in the high school crushes that surround Ladidi. You see the love of a country from Sharif. You see Sweet Pea's love for creativity. And this wild, rakish love with careless abandon that, Andre exudes. In the Madhouse, love is a signal that everybody responds to. And the lack of it is always felt by the characters of the Madhouse. It is what even mostly breaks down their relationships when some characters just feel like they are not loved as they should be. Now, you could argue that, love is inherently self-felt in the Madhouse, because, at some point, it feels like these characters are smoldering to provide life for the object of their desire. But you could see that when that love was returned, everybody bloomed. You could see that in how Sweet Pea and Sharif make up. You could see that in what Max realizes about his life. Love creates, it changes, and it heals things in this story. And the exploration of it, his ideas about love, is something that I totally agree with in this story. And then we talk about family. What is family? Is family blood, or is it people that you choose? You see how Sweet Pea chose Sharif, and they become family. They did not even need to marry to call themselves husband and wife. You could see Ladidi coming into the house and just being accepted as a person inside the house. When it comes to Madhouse, family is like this choice that you make because you love the person. One of the things that I love about the exploration of family here is that love is a faithful sacrifice of self that is needed for any community to function. We are going to hurt each other as long as we run our little games, but what makes us stay with each other is that choice we make to stay. And it is made easier when we love, when we decide that, okay, we like this person. But, of course, there's now the whole conundrum of self-love that, it will take a whole other video to explore and balance. There are so many times that Sweet Pea and Sharif could have just gone apart, but because of how they decided to choose each other. So we choose family, basically. That's one thing I would say about this. Another idea that I found really evocative here is, I would say, I want to say mental health, or I don't want to call it mental illness, because the title first says the Madhouse, which basically just simply means that we're heading into something with mental illness. The house was actually an asylum for people to come and heal, to be honest. So sometimes I was wondering that maybe it is the ghosts inside the house that is worrying everybody inside this family. Even the neighbors on Freetown Street actually think that everybody in this house is mad. They come with pitchforks, come and attack them at one time because they were weird. First time I read this book, I saw it as a treatise on mental illness and its exploration, and I was applauding TJ Benson on his take on the subject. On subsequent reads, the matter is actually a lot more than mental illness. Inside this story, what we can see is, at a personal level, how mental illness or mental disorders can shape choices, influence relationships, and change the social dynamics of a situation from what it is supposed to be, ideally. The mental state really colors how the people of the Madhouse conduct their life. Sharif's drinking to battle his PTSD and his avoidant nature that develops from his life never being under his control. I learned in the Madhouse that mental illness doesn't really just come from anywhere. I see Sharif's PTSD as a result of his time with the army. Max continues to traumatize himself as he cuts out bits of himself to give his brother, just going through so many extremes to make sure Andre is alive. Sweet Pea's mental breakdown that is induced from loss upon loss of people that means something to her. There's really a very, very clear line from trauma to mental illness. And the people on Freetown Street are also not okay. Their superstitions and madnesses result from the pressures of a dying country and them having little to no information about it because of the gag on the press deployed in the 90s. For me, it feels like just a dark time in history, with the whole military rule and everything. And when there was no information, everybody was like forced to explain their surroundings away and explain things away. Imagine a whole country of these kinds of people and just think of how mentally sick everyone was. Something that I think we can still see the effects of in today's society in Nigeria. We were really traumatized effectively in the 90s as Nigerians, to be honest. Is that I would encourage readers in this to engage actively and educatively with the depictions of mental illness in a madhouse, and just see what was there and just go on and understand more, because it will help us clarify whatever education, knowledges, or things that we know about it. So yeah, another theme that I found really, really wonderful there is self-expression. So you see, I find that in times where we have no control over our environment, one thing that is very, very healing and awesome is self-expression. And because this is how Sweet Pea instills education into the people under her care, the students at home, to her children, Max and Andre have space to ask questions. This gives them a very, very happy childhood that they can draw from. She gives them a wall to paint. She paints her husband. She also does her painting. If there's one thing that saved everybody in that house from total despair, it was there was space for them to express themselves. The encouragement of self-expression sort of creates a heaven inside the madhouse. We see how immune they are to the ills of the government around them. Why the people on Freetown Street are sort of running mad and dying. And once these people exist inside the madhouse, it felt like a heaven. They are soaking in GP tanks while it is hot in the day. They are throwing each other up and down. The mother is painting them colors. It's just like a good time. I would like to move into the literary discourse, and let's just examine the techniques and devices and things that happened here. TJ Benson's The Madhouse is such a strong debut because of what it does for storytelling techniques. The Madhouse is a garden, like I said before. That's why I say it blooms like a flower. Each character is a plant that grew from the seeds that TJ Benson must have imagined or planted. There are other gardener stories too. I think The 100 Years of Solitude is a gardener story. You have just characters just forming and just affecting the universe. And yet, The Madhouse is very much in the line of that. As for writers, gardening your characters is a very great technique because you get very rich and nuanced, detailed characters that way. It can be very, very time consuming. I'll tell you that for free. And you never know when your garden will be complete and when you publish this book. But when it is ripe, I can assure you that it's something you will never, ever, ever regret. The main reason why I even like gardener stories is that they have a very, very rich post-narrative space. Now, let me explain post-narrative space. The post-narrative space includes philosophies, theories, story implications, and, the discussions that exist after the conclusion of the narrative. This entire review is kind of like an exercise in post-narration because I am not really just engaging with the narrative and engaging with what the narrative has implied in my regular world. And you can see how rich this has been, how really excited I am, because at the end of the day, this is a garden story and there are so many things to talk about. Now, by leaving things as they are and not trying to interpret them at any point, TJ Benson just sets up a really fertile environment for post-narration. So we can apply our own interpretations to things. Like I said earlier, that there are scenes that I argue with him on it because, we can debate, we can discuss, we can explore what several characters mean to us at any point according to how we view them. We can also see how that universe relates with our own. We can compare, contrast, describe, analyze, give breakdown of things, why they are. The level of post-narration that the Madhouse inspires is truly a gift, to be honest. And like I've said before, this is not my last engagement with the text on this channel. I will definitely take out parts of this novel to talk about in class and to talk about here in later videos. Now, let's leave the concept of gardening stories here because I really don't want to give people too much free game. Any day in this life, I will sign up for a non-chronological plot. I love me a scattered timeline that I have to piece together like a puzzle. Now, that's just me. Each story gives us a new piece of the puzzle, adds more definitions to the things that happen in the Madhouse. We get several perspectives, and we also exercise our empathy for these characters. TJ Benson really set me on doing a lot of emotional work while reading this story. I love the language and tone, Of course, people say literary fiction is boring and slow, but I can assure you that Madhouse is not one of them. It is very fresh, it is contemporary in its approach. There's endless bits of like broken English and pidgin in the dialogue. There are so many real-world elements that are woven into this story that you can relate with. And all of this is done so naturally that they draw you into the book rather than, shake your suspension of disbelief. It's a great balance of show and tell. This was a fun read, and it had a little bit of, anything you could ask from the story. At the end of this book, I felt like I knew the characters personally, and as I said before, each read draws me closer to them. I understand their ethos clearer, and specifics get clarified. I enjoyed this so much that sometimes I just pick it off the shelf and just read a few lines. It always leaves something inside me. I would say the Madhouse is a very, very good investment. Like, don't pass this book without reading some of it. It's like drugs that never finish. Unlimited drug works. I hope that landed. Anyway, this is very, very good literary fiction. Don't try to pigeon the Madhouse into a place. Just experience it for what it is. Allow it shape you, allow it affect you, just go through it. So you can get the Madhouse at any place that sells African literary fiction. So in Abuja, you're looking at Roving Heights, Spine and Label, Adams Pages, Lagos, Roving Heights, anywhere. You can find copies of the Madhouse at used bookstores because I think I started popping up. So if you have any old bookseller, you might actually find the Madhouse there if you cannot afford the new one. If you are going to join the Leopard House workshop, it's do you well to actually read the Madhouse because it's one of our resources. When you read it at least like twice, we'll be able to introduce these elements of fiction to you. It would be much easier because the Madhouse has everything that a writer could need. Throughout this review, I tried to not spoil it. I tried to bring my natural reactions, and on the edit now, I'm looking like it feels like I should do it again, but it's not the last time I'll be interacting with this text. I intend to talk about this text in class and probably even share some clips. So I hope you writers have learned a lot from this review, and I hope readers kind of like know what to expect when they are reading the Madhouse. This review is supposed to serve as a guide to just help you access what would normally be inaccessible in the Madhouse. It's one of the core books in my library. On its own, it's actually a very, very profound piece of work that I think has shaped my own personal storytelling and shaped how I approach Nigerian novels. If you want to sign up for the Leopard House workshop, I'm always here. Shoot me an email. I'll leave my email in the description. I'll leave the form in the description if you want that. If you've read the Madhouse and you think there's something I missed or something I did not explain well, let's have a conversation in the comments below. If you have somebody that you think would benefit from this review, please share it to them by all means. Yeah, share it to them. If you have somebody that wants to read the Madhouse and maybe they have given up halfway, give them this review. And so I would see you guys in the next review. What's even the next book I'm reading? I am reading The Creation of Half-Broken People by Sifiwe. But we'll see at the next one. Whatever book I review, I know that it will be a good one, and I hope to be much better than this. So I hope I have provided value to you book readers, and I hope you enjoyed this. Please tell me what you think. I will be awaiting your feedback. And once again, thanks to our sponsor for the mic. I think this gave us a better review. So I'm still Shama, and the Madhouse has been replayed. Thank you.